Today, we're going to dive into the very important topic of how you measure sales teams' performance. You've probably heard the quote, "When performance is measured, performance improves." However, in sales, there are so many things to track that it can get pretty tricky on how to measure a sales team's performance. Well, don't worry, because by the end of this video, I want to show you exactly how to successfully measure a sales team's performance to get the most out of them. Imagine a game where there's no score being kept and stats aren't being recorded. How would you ever know who's winning? Well, sales are a lot like that. The challenge is tracking performance isn't a topic that most salespeople want to talk about. However, a solid understanding of metrics can turn a good team into a great one. So let's spend the next few minutes diving into what metrics are and specifically what metrics determine a sales team's success. I will also show you why tracking performance matters, and I'll give you some real-world examples that has helped turn good sales teams into great ones. If you're ready, let's go. Why is tracking performance important, and how does it work in the sales world? Well, any organization, sales is the lifeblood of that organization, right? But it's just the tip of the iceberg is what you see. So when you look at a company and you say, okay, they've got really good sales, you're looking at the very tip of the iceberg, but really the whole story is told underneath the water of stuff that you do not see, right? That's where metrics come into play and will show you all the answers you need to why sales are either good or not so good. Remember the quote at the beginning? When performance is measured, performance improves. But I actually like this quote even better. Where performance is measured and reported back, performance really improves. So it's that little bit of difference from not just measuring it, but measuring it and reporting back that we actually see metrics and performance skyrocket. There's a book that I read many years ago, and it's not one that's very popular, but it's one that I really love because it helped me understand this concept. It was called, "It's Not the Big That Eat the Small, but It's the Fast That Eat the Slow." And there was a story in that book that talked about a Spanish franchise over in Spain. It was a pizza franchise in Spain. And this individual had started this franchise, this pizza business. And what he did to advertise or get more customers is he would deliver flyers. He would deliver flyers all day long. And he got to the point where he knew so well that if he delivered X amount of flyers, that would result in X amount of calls. Those X amount of calls would result in X amount of orders. And those X amount of orders would result in X amount of revenue. He had it down to a science where he understood the metrics to the point where he knew exactly what his business was going to do, for the most part, within a small percentage on a monthly basis and an annual basis, and he knew how to scale and grow it. And at that point, when you have those type of metrics, it is so easy to scale and grow the business. It's why this pizza franchise became one of the largest in all of Spain. Another important point is how metrics determine success and why. Broken down to its basic core, metrics are the scoreboard. I don't know if you ever remember a story. It's probably about 7, 8, 9 years ago, there was an organization who said, listen, we're not going to track any performance. We're not going to track anything. We're not going to hold people accountable to stuff. That's the olden days. We're just going to do things by this new vibe, this new way. We're not going to track anything. Anyway, they got rid of all the scoreboards, all the metrics, all the tracking. And eventually, what do you think happened in that organization? Well, if you said they failed, you're exactly right. They struggled to have any form of accountability and eventually it went out of business. So keeping a scoreboard or having metrics is vital for the success of any organization. When it comes to sales, one of the most important metrics to look at is conversion rate. Now, people might say, well, conversion rate, that's probably just below the surface, right? Maybe if water's a little bit lower, you might see that, which is a really good point because there's even an underlying story for that. In our business, we knew conversion rate had to be a certain amount, right? But we knew what led to a good conversion rate was some underlying metrics that we also tracked, which was phone time, that a rep was on the phone talking to people, and dials, right? And if we tracked dials and phone time, we knew that if they had the metrics we were looking at, what we required, that eventually they would have the conversion rate and the sales, and it all led up to the metrics we were looking for within our organization. And it's funny, we could always tell if somebody had a lower phone time or a lower dials, we always knew without a doubt what was happening to that individual. So here's what we found out. If somebody had a lot of phone time and very little dials, but not very many sales, we knew that person was talking too much. We knew that when they got on the phone, they were giving way too much information, that the potential customer on the other end was getting all the information they wanted and they weren't ready to make a decision. They didn't want to make a decision, right? On the other side of the coin, if we had somebody that had a whole bunch of dials and very little phone time, we knew that something was wrong in their metaverbal, nonverbal communication, that something they were saying at the first part of the phone call was way off. They might have been speaking too fast. They might have been speaking too high. They might have been speaking too soft, using a lot of filler words. But we knew that people did not want to be on the phone with this person. So they'd call the potential customer would hear their voice and want to get off. So we knew what type of training we needed to do with these individuals based solely off of those two metrics, phone time and dials. And another metric that probably sits just below the surface there as well is, in our business, is appointment set. That's a metric that we really need to track. If somebody sets an appointment, that eventually goes to a close and eventually will go to a sale. So if there's no appointments, the chances of you getting sales are very, very low. So I remember a time in an organization when we used to compensate people that came into the organization on appointment set, right? They'd get their base and we'd give them a bump or a raise depending on how many appointments they set. Now this can be a little bit tricky because if you compensate somebody just on sets and they're sending over crappy set after crappy set, that's not gonna work out. So they had to meet certain metrics. So a set defined was somebody who actually picked up the phone and had at least a 5, 10, 15-minute conversation with the program director. If it didn't meet those metrics, it wasn't a set. If somebody got on the phone and said, listen, I thought about it, I'm not interested, that wasn't a set. When you do incentivize based off of metrics that you know lead towards the success that you want in your organization, you gotta make sure that it's clearly defined what those are so there's no question or disputes. And one last thing we see that's really important in our organization is going below just conversion. Let's talk about that for a second. Let's say that you got in 10 leads and you closed one of those leads. You're at a 10% conversion rate, which is pretty dang good. But depending on the leads that you're working, it might be, what are you closing out of 100 leads? So if you have 100 leads and you close 3 or 4 of them, you're at 3 or 4% close rate. However, conversion rate can be pretty tricky. All right, so if we look at that scenario, sales rep A had 15,000 in sales off of 3 to 4 sales, right? Sales rep B, they had 19,000 off of 2 sales. So if you compare the two, sales rep B actually had a higher dollar per lead. He was at $190 a lead, 19,000 in sales off of 100 leads, whereas sales rep A had $15,000 off of 100 leads. He was at $150 per lead. So sales rep B had a 25% higher dollar per lead than sales rep A. So if you're going to give more leads to which rep are you going to give more leads to? Obviously this one, because he's pulling more money. Now you want to watch that over a period of time to make sure that is consistent, but that is one thing that we looked at in an organization that made a ton of sense for us. Now these are things that we've seen in our organization that have worked really well. I'd love to hear what you've done to track metrics within your sales team, and let's engage in a dialogue. And as always, just for stopping by, watching my page, watching this video, I've got a free gift for you. It's aaronsSalesTraining.com. It's 10 modules of our Persuasion and Influence course that we've used to train all of our salespeople. It's fantastic. We normally sell it for $1,000, but it's a completely free gift for you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Have an amazing day.